Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sorry.
All right. You ready?
Yeah.
Like, where are we now?
Well, you would, if you want to start again, I don't know. It's okay if you
How about the
pick up.
layout? I'll refresh.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Good evening. Welcome to the Alice Springs Board of Education December 10th, 2015 meeting. We already went through this, greeting everybody and saying hello, calling to order, but we were having some issues with the video. So we are going to move right into welcoming the persons that are present in the audience and letting everybody know we're happy you're here and looking forward to hearing from you, because now we are moving on to 2.1, which is communications and community comments. So anybody in the audience who'd like to be recognized before we ask the Greene County Career Center Superintendent to talk with us? We'll hear from everybody soon enough. Okay, very good. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Really grateful to be here. Mario, thank you.
You're welcome. Let me introduce Dave Deskins. He's the superintendent of Greene County Career Center. He's done an incredible job in his time there, and really a visionary leader. And we're very excited that he's joined the team, if you will. And so Dave's going to talk a little bit about a matter of how we can continue doing what we're doing with our Career Center representatives, how we select them, and make sure that we are able to legally maintain that and do what we can to continue to support our work and our process for electing people to the board. So that's the simplest way to describe what you're going to describe, maybe in a lot more minutes.
That was perfect.
Would you like to come to the microphone and talk?
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm a little bothered because when I change my hairstyle, they usually tell me to leave. They don't want to compliment me.
I'm not sure you heard compliments. I think
Questions?
Watch what you ask for, Dave.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be present tonight. We are working on an initiative that really is a response to a piece of legislation that passed back in September of 2013. We had a local legislator who made a proposal to make a change to the makeup of Board of Educations for joint vocational schools around Ohio. That piece of legislation actually went into law near the end of September of 2013, and it brought with it kind of a unique set of circumstances. The intent, I think, of the original legislation was to position career centers to have more influence from industry partners in the region. The goal and, I guess, design of the measure was to force local boards of education to give different consideration to members they were about to appoint to joint vocational school boards. And so the legislation went through and it passed. What came with it was kind of a unique set of circumstances, as is often the case when legislation is put into law. There are unexpected consequences of those choices, and just in this scenario, the very same thing occurred. So the primary components of this piece of law were that the boards were no longer allowed to appoint forever board members to career centers, so they put term limits on their opportunities to serve, and the law now actually allows only 2 periods of 3 years for service by board member appointments from local districts. Another component was they wanted a more scrutinizing process for identifying who should be eligible for a career center board, making sure that they complied with a number of different business and industry kinds of backgrounds, the diversity of a region, the workforce development of a region, etc. And so they implemented the law. What happened around Ohio is a lot of superintendents of career centers went around and they started working closely with all of their member school boards of education to kind of work together to control it, because some of the unintended consequences were as follows. One such circumstance was that these board terms were great, but there was no discussion about what happened if someone was unseated from their local board, but they were in the middle of their term on a career center board. We actually had that happening with 2 board members this year at the Greene County Career Center. So this became a little bit more pressing for us. It had not been addressed a few years ago, and so I'm having the privilege of working on that. The second piece that became kind of unusual is that there's no residency requirement now. So what that could mean is that if we don't get an agreement as a county on how we want to handle appointments to our Greene County Career Center board, boards of education can appoint members from anywhere in the country they wish to be our board members, which becomes a little bit problematic because when they travel to our board meetings, we have to pay them. And so if they're coming from Florida, we would have to pay them for their travel expenses and their time to come and serve. So what we've done is we have put together a package. This has happened around Ohio with a number of career centers, where we go to the local boards of education and we ask them to consider entering into a memorandum of understanding with the Career Center about how we will appoint and handle board appointments from the schools in our county. So what you have in front of you in your folders are the pink sheet, which is the actual sample MOU that we would ask your board to consider allowing to go into place. This MOU basically complies with Ohio law. It was drafted by attorneys on behalf of the Ohio Career Tech Superintendent Organization, but in conjunction with members of Board of Education and local school superintendents. Thankfully, I have a background as a local school superintendent. I served 6 years at K-12 district in Northwest Ohio. So it was nice for me to be able to look over this as well to make sure that we were protecting the interests of both the K-12 schools as well as the schools that we serve at the Career Center. So the first document that you have there is the pink sheet that just identifies and highlights. Probably the most critical piece in there that's a little bit unique to our region from other regions is that we are asking our board to allow us to have no more than 2 representatives appointed from anywhere on earth. We're hoping that at least 5 of our 7 board members can be appointed from member school regions, so we truly have representation from our region. Otherwise, we could have all 7 board members be from anywhere in the United States or outside of. So we just want to try to formalize that. So that piece would be the most unique part for your board, but what you would be agreeing to is that we would never allow more than 2 members to be outside of our region. So if 2 other school communities in Greene County had appointed someone from outside of Greene County's region, you, by virtue of this agreement, are indicating that you would respect that and not appoint a 3rd. So other than that, the other pieces of this are pretty standard across the other career centers in Ohio. I know Mario probably has or will forward this to you electronically, but I just wanted to provide the hard copies for you. The document behind the pink sheet, which I think is the blue sheet, is a resolution that we're providing to assist your board. That resolution's purpose would be to authorize Mario on your behalf to enter into the memorandum of understanding. So all that would need to be done with that is insertion of your school district and information, the date, and so on, that your board would consider that. And that would free Mr. Vasora up then to enter on behalf of the Yellow Springs Board of Education into that memorandum with the other 6 Greene County schools. The document following that, I believe is a yellow sheet, is the questionnaire. This is actually a document we created to help protect your board. This document is actually an application that allows you to qualify candidates for board appointment. So by having a candidate who you're intending to consider for submission as a board member at the Career Center, having them complete this gives you documentation so that as a board you can identify that yes, we did have a screening process, yes, we looked at the candidate's qualifications, and we do believe that they meet the revised code business and industry standards. And then the document at the end is actually a document that will be used for you in the future. That's the resolution that you actually could utilize to use for appointment of whomever you want as your board member representative for the Greene County Career Center. So we just put this packet together. We are asking all of the school districts in the county to consider joining so that we can have a little bit of control locally over what happens at the Career Center and with residents here in Greene County. And so that being shared, I'll open up for any questions and try to respond to those if I can. Yes.
So I wanted to raise this at our last Career Center meeting, but thought maybe this would be the better venue. How much latitude do you think under the new law one of the districts has to set its own rules? You're creating an MOU between your member districts and the Career Center, but are we, if we wanted to, allowed to and able to create our own set of guidelines? For example, if we wanted to insist that we will only appoint people who live in Greene. Do you see what I'm asking?
I do.
What kind of latitude do we have as a district?
So as a district, your latitude is small because it's a law, and the qualification requirements are now established by Senator Widener's submitted piece of legislation. So you don't have a lot of latitude to develop your own guidelines per se, but your board can make agreement that you're going to only choose to appoint Greene County residents or Yellow Springs residents.
Okay.
Those are choices and decisions that you can make.
Okay.
The qualifications that are on the application are the bare minimum that Ohio requires. In part, what was happening is there was a belief by some legislators in Ohio that there was not enough true representation of people from business and industry sitting on career center boards. After the fact, they realized that most career centers actually utilize pretty heavily what we call advisory committees. So each one of our labs and each one of the programs we offer have a group of adults from business and industry who we solicit every year to come in and support our lab, help us stay current with what the market needs are in business and industry. So we were already actually accessing a lot of that. But apparently legislators were not aware of that, and so they decided that they were going to try to force a little bit more business and industry perspective in. They didn't just want the same people on career center boards that had been there for 20 years. So thus the term limits and also the higher qualification. After they did this, of course, there was enormous pushback from boards of education around Ohio. For instance, people who live in farming communities, who have people who are farmers in their region. Well, in agricultural regions, farming is the industry. So for the state to come in and try to suggest legislation for that was highly offensive to many boards of education around Ohio. So what we think is permissible by your board is your ability to identify and determine those criteria informally together. The document that we've provided is just a means by which you can cover yourselves if someone were to come back and say, doggone it, you allowed that Mr. Khan on the Career Center board, what was your basis? Here's the basis. We identified his qualifications. These are all in line with the law that you put in place, and he's done a great job of service for us, and we continue his service.
I was really only part of the problem. And is it your sense, this law's been in place now for 2 years, give or take. Has it created any churn among Career Center boards that you're aware of?
No, I have spoken with career superintendents around Ohio. There are a few who have continued board members. So this is a kind of another thing that could happen. So let's say Mr. Khan finishes his next term and chooses not to run again or is not reelected. The Yellow Springs board could say, we love the work that Mr. Khan was doing at the Career Center. We want to reappoint him anyways. So there are some career centers who have created some churn in that regard.
Right.
Very few board members have left career center boards because of this piece of legislation.
Okay.
It just isn't happening.
Yeah.
It's created some different caveats in that how do we handle it now when a board member gets unseated,
Right.
but we're still obligated by law to continue their appointed career center term
Right.
of service.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I guess just a clarifying question, yeah, at least in Greene County, are all the board members on your board, board members in their districts? Or are they actually appointing business leaders and others?
So prior to this legislation, they all had to be appointed from the local boards.
Right.
So all 7 of our members, 1 came from.
But now that
each
the legislation
district.
came, have you seen a change where boards are appointing?
We have not.
You have not seen it?
Yeah, we have not yet. Our board, well, we anticipate those boards are going to want to retain that control, excuse me, because when they get feedback regularly on what we're doing at the Career Center, different things that are taking place, and to have someone who's not present for your board meetings every month means somebody has to either come in and make a special effort to make those reports, or you lose that connectivity to your kids who attend Career Centers. So we're not seeing a lot of move on it at all.
How about in any of the other districts, any of the other superintendents you've spoken with? Is there-
Yeah, no, we're not hearing a lot of movement on it. We're not really sure. I mean,
I said to you at our last meeting that this struck me as a solution in search of a problem. And that it wasn't, because as you said, there are already advisory boards and committees from the specific areas that career centers are training for. And so what is this really doing here except creating another small set of confusions and hoops and whatnot? So.
Sure, and there are always, and Mario will know this, but there are always underlying reasons why pieces of legislation get presented.
Right.
And that's certainly my understanding of part of the reason for this legislation. Thank you very much for your time. And
Thank you, Dave.
if I can answer any other questions, Mario knows how to reach me, or any of you are welcome to call. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks
a lot.
Nice
Thanks,
to
sir.
meet
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Likewise.
All right, moving on to schools in action. Ninth grade food for thought presentation. Come on up.
Okay.
So after the first two slides, you can just press play on.
Oh, can I? Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
So you want to just introduce yourself?
absolutely. So I'm Desiree Nickel, most of you know me. I'm a language arts teacher at Yellow Springs High School, and this is Alex Ronbaum. She's going to be doing most of the talking. I just want to introduce the project, Food for Thought. Last year when we decided we were going to go to a block schedule, that enabled all of the 9th grade classes, 10th grade classes to be aligned in such a way that teachers could develop integrated curriculums so that we could have common planning time and also create one project that was on one subject that we were all focusing on in our classes. So we've been working since I think April of last year to pull this project together. Our fearless leader was Elizabeth Simon, the art teacher. She's also a PBL coach. It's a PBL project. Participating teachers, Ms. Iguargier from biology, Mr. Day from history. I represent English, Ms. Simon from art. We have both special ed teachers, Jody Chick and Donna Haller, and I'm sure I forgot a major, oh yes, foreign language, Kathy Brooklyn from Spanish. We all participated. And so I'm going to let Alex talk to you about how the project went.
So I'm a freshman at Yellow Springs High School, and so like Ms. Nichols said, in the freshman class this past semester, we embarked on a project integrated between about 9 different classrooms. This monstrous project was called Food for Thought. So we separated the grade into about 15 different groups, and each group was sort of branched off of this big driving question, which is what is food culture, and how can we cultivate a healthier community through education about food choice. And so each group had an investigation question. For example, my group's was behind the scenes of sugar, how does sugar get from the farm to the table, and how does it affect us? And then to branch it off even further than that, each person in each group had a research question that we researched about and sort of talked about with our group, and then wrote a research paper about it, which we're just now, they were due today with her class. So.
The final draft.
The final draft, yeah. And so each group is branched under this huge driving question that the whole expo was about. And then you can just go ahead and press play. So sort of our gaining knowledge process before we were grouped, we went to Antioch College and we got tours from the students there, and they included, like, we learned about bees, and they took us through their gardens and their woody areas. And, it was a really good experience, and I think we learned a lot about not just food, but actually like how it's processed, how they raise it, and humane ways to slaughter it. And I think it was a really good activity to do before we were grouped, just to gain knowledge about the whole project. And then after that, we had Mariano Rios come to our school from La Pampa Grill, and he cooked for us, and he does slow food cooking, and it was really delicious. It was awesome. And we
had those sandwiches.
Yeah, we had like sausage and chicken, and oh my gosh, it was awesome. He can come to my house and cook for us. But and he sort of talked to us about more on the cultural side of food rather than the actual process of it. And so he talked to us about cultures from around the world and how they're different, and how he's been to I think it was 7 or 8 different parts of the world cooking, and he learned about their culture, and just talking to us about that really sort of opened our eyes to how like every place is different and stuff that we know is not the same in different countries and stuff. And so after that we had Bradley Campbell from Juice Plus come in and talk to us about hydroponic gardens. And I know if you were at the Food Expo, right when you walked in, you saw these huge gardens right by the front door. And so he sort of talked to us about more of growing food rather than culture or how it's made. And so he came in and we really learned a lot about how it's grown. And we actually, with the hydroponic gardens, they grow, I think it was 3 or 4 times faster than if you just grow it in the ground. And so that was a really nice thing to have at exhibition night. And then we had Kelsey Timmerman he writes books. They were called Where Am I Eating and Where Am I Wearing, which is about clothing and food from around the world, and how we don't really have food seasons anymore because you can get anything at any time. And so he sort of talked about how like the good part of like having strawberries like just in the summer, and like how it's just like a good thing to look forward to. I'm not saying I don't like strawberries, but just how it kind of like not ruin, but the food culture of stuff. And so after that, there were some movies that we watched, Fresh and Food Inc., which sort of opened our eyes about cattle and agriculture from around the world. And then we read 2 books, not 2 books, like 5 or 6, I think. But in each group, and we sort of analyzed those books, and we had to write essay questions about the books, and it was, I don't know, I thought I really liked it. And then we moved on to posters. And that was sort of the biggest part of our project, was these infographic and these posters to sort of talk about the event. And the posters are more of advertising it. And so we would hang them up around the school and we would critique them a lot. I think we went through 5 or 6 different critiquing sessions just within our art class. And so after that we made infographics, which that was, I would say, probably the biggest part of our project, where each person had to make one. And I think our guidelines were, they went along with our research questions. And so mine was about how sugar negatively impacts our body and mind. And so my poster, I had 3 different people on it, from the most obese, around the middle obese, and the least obese countries from the world, and their corresponding amount of sugar. And so there was almost a perfect linear pattern with how much sugar the average person consumes in obesity rate. And so after that, if we move on to actually the food night, in total, we had first graders come about 1:30 the day before our event, and that was really because not having to dumb it down, but it's just sort of to actually understand it enough to say it different ways to little kids. I think that really, it definitely helped my group, because they were like, we're used to presenting in front of people we know and that understand what we're supposed to say, but presenting in front of first graders really made us understand our topic, and like, yeah, we were kind of in the dark about this for a while. And then after that...
Sorry, Alex, I'm trying.
Oh, it's all right.
Let me see if I can try it without putting that,
Yeah.
without pushing play. Maybe that's the better way to do it this way.
Just like every few seconds.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
first graders part.
Yeah.
But I know it was really awesome because everyone sort of distinctly knew, like, the first graders are like this tall. They're tiny people. And everyone like knew, like, you just kneel down so you're not like towering over them like I'm this huge person. But they were really interested in it, and I thought it was a really good learning experience for us. And we move on to the actual night itself. I think it was a huge success. I know some of you guys are there. But it really, people were really, I would say, impressed with us because we're just freshmen and we can talk and we can present with like fluency and stuff, and I thought it was really awesome. And especially with the food, like I know one time I lit a grease fire trying to make pasta, and so I learned a lot about cooking and how to handle food and stuff. So I don't know, I thought the night was a huge success, and we really learned a lot about stuff like we didn't even think we'd learn about. I think that's one of the great parts about PBL is you don't learn just you're not just book smart. I would say, for lack of a better word, street smart too. But you learn how to talk to people, and I don't know. I think that's just one of the perks of being in PBL setting school. So yeah. Oh, also, I was one of the students attending the High Tech High trip this year. So if you guys also have any questions about that, you can go ahead and ask me about it.
Well, why don't you just say a little bit about what your experience was, because I was going to ask.
Yeah, I thought it was a really amazing school, and I think definitely if we try to model them, I think it'll be a huge success. And definitely the way they integrated math, I thought that was really interesting. And so definitely, like, I'm trying to get Miss Holly, like, just give her little hints, like, hey, we could do it this way. I don't know. I don't know. They have groups, and at the beginning of each week they get a problem, and the teacher doesn't tell them how to solve it. And then they have to develop formulas and have to develop rhythm and arithmetic patterns to solve the problem. And then at the end of the week they talk about them. And the whole time they're in groups, collaborating. And I thought it was really remarkable, because I didn't, out of all the ways they could do it, that's the one I did not expect. And so I just think it's really, they're not just learning math, they're learning how to talk to each other and collaborate. And I thought it was awesome. And then at the end of the week, they go over the problem, and each group portrays what they thought, or how you could solve it. And so, I don't know, I thought it was really, really cool. Yeah. These are our sponsors.
Yeah, I think, just to say a few words if I can briefly about this. Obviously Alex is a wonderful student. She also does FLL, this first Lego League. Well, she doesn't do FLL.
I did big robots.
She does the big robots now, and so her mom's really involved with FLL. She's actually, not just, that's an understatement actually.
Yeah.
She's kind of in charge of it in Ohio across the entire state, and so big deal. But she's a great student. They came from Huber Heights, right?
Yes.
Can you tell, I'm sorry, just very briefly,
Yeah.
tell them your story about why you chose Yellow Springs.
Oh,
I think that's,
okay.
I'm sorry,
It's fine.
and then I want to talk about Miss Nichols.
So,
This is great. This is a pretty good story. You guys want to
I came from a very like standard, stereotypical military school where Monday through Thursday you read from the textbook and do busy work, and then Friday you have a test. And I didn't learn a single thing. I'm exaggerating, but just to get that. And so, I mean,
Well, you're honest too.
yeah, it was horrible. Like, I got good grades because I could memorize words and I could memorize like certain dates and stuff. And I don't think that's the way to learn. So we talked about schools around the state, and we looked at Yellow Springs, and we saw PBL, and my mom was like, what's PBL? And so we Googled it, and of course. It looked really awesome, because I'm a hands-on person, I build robots and do stuff like that, and so I was like, PBL sounds really cool, Mom, can I go there? And she was like, yeah, let's go check it out. And so we get there, and it was amazing. And so rather than just doing textbook Monday through Thursday and test, you're actually engaging in the stuff. Like, I know last year, and I still remember this even though it was like a year ago, but in Mr. McCoy's class, I'm studying right now, he's 8th grade social studies teacher in 7th grade, and we debated. And like I said, I love talking, so it was really cool, and I was defending Christopher Columbus and killing all the natives. And so we really each person in each group had to come up with an information sheet. And we had to tell all the other groups about our information, and we were kind of playing like lawyers. So we had this Christopher Columbus cut out, and we were like, justice. Like it was a pretty cool, like it was actually like a lawsuit. And so we really talked about it, and that's why I come back to like engaging in the curriculum, not just memorizing this list of words and then taking a test over it. So you don't really learn anything. You can teach a monkey to memorize that 2 + 2 is 4, but you can't teach a monkey why 2 + 2 = 4. So that's why, like comparing the different schools, I don't know. That's why I like Yellow Springs a lot better.
And you've been happy, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Thanks.
My 2nd year here.
Good.
Wonderful.
So very quickly, I want to talk about the teachers because they worked tremendously hard on this project. We've had some really great projects in the past, but this one, it's been the most well-planned, the most, the energy, the care, the passion that went into this by Ms. Nickel and the other teachers is we will never know. What little I do know is that they worked lots of nights, lots of weekends to prepare for this, and they worked tremendously hard for our kids, and I am so proud of them and the work they did on this project, and I speak for everybody, I think, in that regard. But I just think one of the things that made this project unique that they were very intentional on is that the kids really kids just didn't automatically get up and start speaking to the parents and the adults very well. That was true. That took a lot of work and effort and planning by our teachers with the students. The infographics were incredible. That didn't happen overnight either. That took a lot of work from our teachers working with our kids, and so I think they did an incredible job. And I just want to make sure we state that because Desiree and so Desiree also, you may not know this, she went and presented the project at the STEM schools conference that they do, and so Project Right and presented it to other teachers from around the area. So it was, I think it was well received. So I don't know if you want to share anything else, Desiree, that I missed maybe or something that.
Well, I think one aspect of it that we haven't emphasized enough is the community partners that we developed. So we literally had everyone from Mary Kay at the Winds, Elizabeth Wiley from Meadowlark. When you see the list of sponsors, we provided food with each booth. So there were 15 booths, and we had, for instance, a bison chili, and we purchased that from a local farmer. We had a deer chili where the student had actually himself killed the deer. And then Mary Kay worked with a group that put out like a couscous with some vegetables.
That was good.
It was excellent. And so the partners, and I would be remiss not to mention that we had substantial funding from the Yellow Springs Endowment for Education, and also the Martha Holding Jennings Foundation, and the Charlotte Drake Grant, which paid for the T-shirts. And so I think the community partners is an aspect of it that we're very, very proud of, and we're so delighted that the community was as supportive as they were of us in this project. And yes, the teachers worked very, very hard on it, but you couldn't have asked for a better team to work together. We all genuinely cared for, liked, respected each other. We were all very professional, and it was a pleasure working with them. And I'm thrilled to be able to continue to work with them. It just all around was a very exciting project. I think people learned a lot. I know I learned a lot. I didn't know a lot of the things that I came away with. Everyone, of course, now wants one of those hydroponic towers to grow. I mean, the kids who were doing the blue zones, their food item was salad that was picked from hydroponic towers that we grew. And of course, long-term, we're hoping to be able to provide some lettuce to the school so that we'll actually be selling it in the cafeteria as well. So that's a long-range goal. We'll have another collaborative project at the end of the year. We don't know what that'll be yet. It might be smaller scale, certainly isn't going to be as expensive as this one was. But overall, it was a wonderful experiment. I mean, there certainly were some areas that we know we can improve in, and we've been processing it quite a bit. Student teams were processing it. They wrote reflection essays. Teachers have been processing it. We're going to present to our teachers tomorrow at a staff meeting so that the other teachers can learn what we think are the pluses and minuses of the project. I don't think we would do food for thought again next year, but we would do it possibly the following year again, and we just feel like, oh, now we know exactly where the bumps in the road were and how we can smooth those out. So we're pretty excited to do it again, I think.
Great. Wonderful.
Well, I guess the first thing I wanted to say was that my son Zachary also lit a grease fire for a PBL project last year, so I don't know if this is, I mean, something we want to talk to the lawyers about. Or
Maybe the insurance company. We like starting fires.
This was all on film, too. It was all being filmed for Mr. Smith's class. Anyway.
I'm not the best out there.
So I sent the both of you a note afterwards because I was just dazzled by the whole evening. I ate very well, but I think in particular what I would just applaud is that at each of the stations you could see a variety of disciplines behind all the information that was being presented. Math, history, agriculture, I mean all kinds of different disciplines at work, and that's, I think, the best kind of educational work. So I just thought it was unbelievable.
It was impressive too that it was the entire class. That was really neat. And you moved through the entire class and learned about a variety of things and were met with much enthusiasm, at least in my experience. And I think,
Right, I don't think the students knew how much they knew until expo night because they were astounding. I mean, they just stepped up to the plate. They were experts in their topics, and they were happy to share. And they were very articulate and very receptive to questions.
Yeah. Alex, how did you, it's our pleasure to have you presenting here tonight. How did you get in this position to represent and speak on behalf of your students?
I take on way too many extracurricular assignments, schedule's packed. And so I believe that to be really successful in high school and college, you have to participate in everything. And so I'm in pretty much like all the clubs at my school, like that I just like as student review board, Spidey, Alpha, the team that went to Cleveland. And so I just I like being representative, and I'm not going to say bossing people around, but I like that feeling of like, yeah, people come to me for help. Like, I like that. And so Miss Nickel, I was in class one day, and she was like, hey, we have this Board of Education meeting. And it was a group of about 4 students, and she told us about it. And I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to do that. Talking in front of people? Oh yeah. And then other people were kind of hesitant, and I like presenting and stuff. And if I could go on a little bit of a tangent here, I know Ms. Mazur said I'm part of First Lego League, and I'm actually a mentor and a coach this year, and that's how I got presentation skills. So I'm trying to get 1 or 2 teams started at the high school. I know there's 1 or 2 here, but I mean, it's a national affiliation, and it really teaches people life skills. Like my team, we went to Australia last year for a tournament, all on a grant, and so it was totally awesome. But like you learn stuff that you just don't learn in school, like just presentation skills, engineering definitely. Like I know there's a lack of female participants in the STEM field, and I want to be a biomedical engineer when I grow up. So I'm just sort of preaching first, like everywhere I go. Like my mom is the director of FLL for Ohio, and so I definitely. I have connections because I wanted to start anything in a school. So. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Appreciate your time, all both of you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's, I mean, we're gonna see more of this at
Oh, yeah.
exhibition night,
Oh,
which
yeah, that's
is
right.
on Wednesday.
Wednesday,
Wednesday
the
at-
16th, I believe, 6 to 8.
Could you comment the sort of the subtle differences with what the plan is for exhibition versus, because this is really, I think, pretty cool, you know, the nuance in which
Right.
this is kind of another level for us of thinking about this, and I think it's great. So share what you're thinking about exhibition
For
night.
exhibition night? We're doing a very
Sorry.
scaled down, that's okay, a scaled down version. So we're not having 15 booths up, we have the students vote for 4 to 6, I think, of what they think are the best booths. So we'll have them up in full. We'll have some food items available that are aligned with the booths, particularly the blue zones, so we're looking at what you would eat for longevity. And then we will also have other students will share their process. So they'll show their rough draft and their final, so you can get a little sense of the process. And so it will be, and we'll also have that slideshow, but there's a longer version that's like 127 slides, so we'll also show that. And basically just be sharing with people our project. We couldn't do the whole thing over again, it's massive. So it's just a little taste of it, but if you didn't get an opportunity to go, it is a chance to get a sense of what it was we were trying to do, and you get a pretty good idea by looking at the 6 representative booths that we're gonna have there.
I know definitely people are curious, like my group, we made a website and we have Expo Night tab on it that has videos from food night and pictures and before and after stuff, and so if people were like more curious about it, we could put that on our business card and they could find more about it.
Great.
Yeah.
I guess I do have one more question now.
All right.
And I was looking at the list up here. I was wondering, is Sodexo, like, is our food vendor that we represent and work and supply the food to the students? Were they involved in
We
or
work
engaged
with
in this?
Sodexo and we use their kitchen for some things, and so we had to work with Benita to make that happen. And then also we worked with the health department. All the kids had a temporary, they had training and then they had temporary certification as chefs. So they received that training, and that's why you see them all with rubber gloves on, etc. So we worked minimally with Sodexo, but definitely had the cooperation of their staff and let us use the kitchen and made it possible for us and gave us a lot of advice in terms of what we would be able to do and not be able to do. And the goal, of course, is to grow some food that we start selling through Sodexo, so that's our long-range goal there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, thanks for your time. All right, onward to Brian, Mayor, and the band and orchestra presentation.
So when I was a student here from 99 to 03, it was kind of a tradition to take a larger trip as part of the band and orchestra experience. And that kind of alternated between Chicago as the large trip every other year and either Cincinnati or Cleveland as kind of a minor trip on the off years. And just a side note, that was when we had a band and an orchestra teacher both working on things together, and kind of, that provided a automatic extra chaperone and that kind of thing. So I have been working on trying to come to terms with how to get this done as me, as the band and orchestra teacher now, and it's been a while since we've had one of these trips, and it's often noted, I noticed last year in the graduation video that it was many of the seniors' top memory from high school is their trips to wherever they go. And I think for us as a school district, it's really important to have this kind of fellowship time with band and orchestra students together out of the building. It's what happens at other schools during their marching band seasons, where they are working together outside of school many, many hours, traveling together, and it builds a cohesion that translates into the classroom in having them be able to work well together and better together and create a multi-age mentoring. Many high school bands and orchestras are either at least 2 grades, but many of them are 4 grades, like ours are 9 through 12. So my intention is to offer a really dense 2.5 days of travel and musical experiences, which include taking them to my alma mater, Northern Illinois, where They have one of the top steel drum programs in the country, and the two gentlemen that and build the steel drums at our university are from Trinidad themselves, so they brought that culture with them and have kind of infused that around the Midwest. There are colleagues of mine from college who are starting steel drum programs as a parallel to band and orchestra and choir in their schools in the Chicagoland area. Miami University in Ohio has a pretty strong steel band program, so there's some local ability for students, if they're interested after we have this experience, to explore it further, more locally. So the workshop will be them getting to hear some of the college students and the professors play, and then also get time to get some training on the instruments themselves. So the university usually carries a steel band of about 30 people, and we'll have more than enough opportunity to let everyone have experience playing on them and learn about the culture of Trinidad and Tobago and kind of the history of the instrument itself. So that'll be a workshop in the morning on the Thursday that we're in DeKalb, Illinois. And then we'll drive back into Chicago and attend a performance of the Blue Man Group, which is something that we did on the Chicago trips when I was in school, and really inspired a lot of my love of combining music and engineering. I built a PVC xylophone the week after we came back from the Chicago trip in my dad's garage during the winter break, and our trip is scheduled for right before spring break, so the students might have some opportunity to be inspired and do some projects on their own after that. And it's really, for me, kind of where I'm trying to stretch the students of not just having a sit-down concert, but having to think forward about, if you're going to elect to have music as a career, the job opportunities in the major orchestras are really small, and where the niche market is now is creating a persona for yourself, creating not just excellent music, but something that sells your music. And Blue Man Group is the perfect example of that. They took PVC pipe, plumbing pipe, sewer pipe, and turned them into a dozen different instruments, incorporated percussion and some guitars and synthesizers and things, and then also created a show that tells the story while they're telling that music. It's just not, we're going to play this piece, you'll clap, you play this piece, you'll clap. There's pantomime, and there's comedy, and there's art that's built into this whole experience, which for me was kind of the driving force around saying, yes, this is actually what I want to do, and this is why I'm going into music as post-high school education. So that will be early afternoon, and then I want to share some of the Chicago landscape with them. So we've got a plan to attend to go up to the observation deck of the Willis Tower, followed by preceded by, we'll go to dinner first and get some Chicago deep dish pizza, which is a big draw for them there. And then the next morning, spend about an hour touring around Millennium Park, a little bit of free time to sightsee in a free open environment, and then bus back home and be back to start spring break after the end of our trip.
Brian and the band and the music department, they've raised so much money. The cost of this, they're supplementing pretty significantly. So it's a really affordable trip. I think it comes in around $180 or so. And many kids have already paid for it through their individuals fundraising. And Brian did a nice job of trying to figure out a calendar with so many events going on in the school and elsewhere, so that it's only missing one day of school. So I think for Brian's first start getting music, get us out to places, he's done a real nice job of putting this together.
It sounds great.
And I would argue that they're not really missing school, but
Right.
That's right.
That's right.
They're learning a whole lot. Go ahead.
So the Blue Man Group are just incredible. When I was in graduate school, I used to watch them practice in the East Village before they really, and now look where they are today. And so every time I go back to New York or any city where they are at, I'm always wondering at what young age can you introduce, can I bring my 3-year-old there? I mean, this is incredible. influential period in the lives of these students. But just out of your professional opinion, where do you begin to introduce students, young people, to this kind of experience?
To the performance aspect, or to the
to actually
getting them
being in
inspired
that
about
theater,
creating
being
that.
there, experiencing it. All
I think I would say probably 4th grade up would really understand both the comedy of the show and the musical aspects. As far as kind of the inspiration to do it yourself, I would say middle school is really strong. And actually, I didn't mention this earlier, I was talking to one of the sales reps from Blue Man Group Ticket Office, and she said that, I told her, I got inspired to do some of their stuff, and you can see 1,000 YouTube videos of people who have made their own PVC xylophones after having experienced that. And she said the Blue Man Group organization now has dozens of pre-made lesson plans that you can do before a group comes to visit, that kind of gets them in the mindset of, not just going to see a concert, but what am I going to see, and let me look for this because I know what's coming, and that gives them a richer experience to when they're going there and experiencing it. When I went, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before, and it's a multi-sensory experience. They play with the lights in the room, they play with black light versus regular lighting, and they do some camera tricks that are pre-recorded but they look live. So when we went, we had one of my classmates they took him up onto the stage, and it looked like he was participating, and then when it was part of the visual effect, they really had like a body double person that was pre-filmed, and then he came out somewhere else on the stage. So it's really, it doesn't just inspire them musically, it inspires them in stage design and theater and all these other aspects. And I think the whole show is silent as far as speaking is concerned. So all of the stuff that they convey is either through pantomime or written posters on the stage.
Maybe we should all go.
Yeah, I don't think the kids would appreciate that. But I think your 3-year-old would enjoy it because visually it is so incredible. So try not get all the nuances.
Maybe there'll be an elementary school trip to see the Blue Man Group.
Maybe they can come here.
I think it's great that you have the DeKalb connection, so that the steel drum piece.
Yeah.
When I was first talking to Tim about planning the trip, the one that Mr. Farmer had started to put in the works before I started was one to New York and the Kennedy Center, and I said, I just don't feel comfortable. I've never been there. I don't have any connections there. For me, this type of trip was a comfort zone thing, so that I got my feet wet in trip planning. Hopefully I can be helpful to other teachers when they look into planning larger field trips, and I have now a little bit of confidence for the next time we do this of what needs to be in place when, and hopefully it just gets better experience every year.
Well, thanks for taking it on.
Yeah,
I know
thank you.
it's another huge responsibility. And I appreciate your sensitivity in terms of, integrating all these areas culturally and so forth too, so.
It's a great idea. Thanks, Brian. I'm glad you're doing this. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
All right, moving on to administrative reports, 2.3. Okay, you're on the list first, Matt.
Tim wants to go.
If I can go, let's put a 2-minute limit on it, because there's been a lot of my school up there, and when you take a look at my board report, there are just lots of things going on. If you look at those bulleted reports, and less time than normal. To talk a little bit about the food for thought thing, I just want to bring it back to a discussion back, maybe it was February of last year, where we've been working for a couple of years at our school to try to figure out block scheduling and trying to figure out some of these things. And both a superintendent who advocated for what we're trying to do, but you guys as a board who are receptive to his advocacy for our staffing tweaks to be able to make really food for thought possible. And we said we were going to try to deliver things, and for you who were able to make it, it really was nothing short of remarkable. And I sort of understated you know, people say, what do you think? I said, I think we're on to something, you know? But we couldn't have done that without that movement back in February, March, or whatever that was. So I just want to point that out really as the board report, as my report to you, and thank you for that. And we appreciate the confidence that you did in making that decision, and we'll try to keep doing right by you.
All right.
All right,
That
Matt?
was less than 2 minutes.
Let's see here. So what's been consuming our time? The all-school musical is happening tomorrow and Saturday, and this is after 10 weeks of really, really intense work by everyone. I mean, an example of that is that, you know, we took 300 kids to the Robeson Center today, and, you know, barely got back. We didn't get back in time, but it was just like the organization around doing that kind of thing is huge, and it was very successful, and it's necessary if you're going to do a show on this type of scale. So I hope that you guys are able to come see it. It is so awesome.
The ticket frenzy has already started.
Yeah, well, I think there's more tickets available than we initially thought, but I mean, it's just some of these kids have practiced every day for 10 weeks. I mean, they've been just practicing at home, school, and so that commitment's really cool. And you know, it's not a PBL project, but it's so like PBL like-ish. You know that I think it really it's pretty awesome. Some other PBL highlights. I think there was an article in the paper today about the second grade project that brought senior citizens into the school, and it was kind of the launch of creating these connections to our seniors in our community, reciprocal relationship where we're sharing with them, they're sharing with us, and so that's a cool project. It has potential to really to be very important for our kids and for the community as well. So check that article out. That's really, I think, pretty impressive. The Hour of Code project is getting some good press right now. We were in the Xenia newspaper
Front page.
2 days ago, and Mario did a good job of sending it out. And then the local paper is covering it for next week. And you know, to me, it's amazing because K6, our entire building, we're going to do the Hour of Code here. It is third graders teaching the school how to do it. They're running the show completely. The teacher is just kind of, letting them go for it. And, third grader going into a 6th grade classroom and teaching them how to do something. It's pretty impressive. And it's not just like, here's the website. They've made, teaching materials and videos and different ways to kind of create this curriculum and help people understand what it is. So some really pretty neat stuff happening right now, and real busy around school. It's a sprint as we get to winter break, but it's good stuff. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me about anything.
I also just want to mention this bag project that's percolating. So that seemed like an interesting idea.
Right.
There was a presentation at the library last week, beginning of this week?
So that was for the FLL, First
Yeah.
Lady League? Is that what you're referring to? Yeah. Which is, that's the Lego League, the teams that we know about are, their students here, parents, coaching, there's a lot of just kind of conversation back and forth and
it's
connection
just
to what we're doing as a school.
Well, but it's also just great to have kids making presentations in public places, to grown-ups about ideas that
They're passionate about it, and that's,
Exactly.
that is why we're doing PBL. It's like that
Right.
is very representative of what we're trying to do
Yeah.
during the school day. So.
Well, I think Alex really brought it up when basically how integrated everything is. I mean, you speak about it in a different way to younger kids than to the audience that you bring in the night of the presentation, and oh my gosh. I mean, that's
I met her as a first grader because she went to the school that I was used to be the
of
principal
course,
of.
yeah.
Huber Heights, and she was very impressive as a first grader. Already, she was just dynamic, so.
That's cool.
Well, I think about these third graders, they're going to be really dynamic by the time they hit the high school, because they're going to have had so much practice
Yeah.
themselves.
Makes Megan Bennett's doing great work with those kids, so she's really fantastic. So.
All right, well, thanks. Okay. I think you're on.
I just give you a little bit of highlights of what's going on. The preschool is working, they're continuing to work with MRDD and the Play Project, and it's one of the best embedded professional developments I've seen. They come out and they actually videotape students that are involved with the Play Project, which is a program that was developed from a man named Dr. Solomon. It is to address social learning for kids with autism, but it's an actual developmental system tailored towards autism, but teaches a lot about the developmental kind of perspective that teachers maybe don't get to think about when it comes to social development. Teachers know how to teach reading and math and content standards, but they don't really understand how to teach behavior and social skills. It's not as concrete to them. So what they're doing is they come out, they videotape students that have permission, their parents are in part of this project, and then meet with the team. And there's like one of our sessions at the bottom where there's a behavior specialist psychologist from MRDD, a speech therapist, our preschool teacher, Janice Kombuski, and then I got cut off from the picture, but the assistant who isn't getting paid but just volunteered to come, the OT, and then the Play Project consultant, who's one of 5 people in the state that's trained to do this. And they watch the videotapes and go over the actual developmental levels and what could be done to work with the student at the level they're at, identify what level they're at, and how to intervene and make them work through those developmental stages to make progress. So it's got a lot of great research behind it, and the staff is just amazed because instead of going to a workshop and coming back and being kind of inundated with information, not understanding exactly how to implement it, they have people coming out periodically to work with the staff and team with them at the end of the day, and then they'll have these workshops where they go over the videos for in-depth training. So I just was really excited and wanted to share that goes on because it's your public preschool and you need to know what happens in your public preschool. So that's one of the many exciting things. Then in school age special education, today Jody took her students, a group of students, over to Antioch Midwest because they were having a conference that was called Valuing Diversity, Reframing Disability. It was for professionals that are in schools, colleges, different agencies that work with disability, and there were a variety of different workshops. And the students, Jody's students, had been working on making different bracelets, ornaments, all kinds of different items that they were real proud of that they were selling in the front of the entrance to the conference. So I went and saw them today right before they broke for lunch, and looked like they were, they had another booth up there. I wasn't sure who the other booth was because I didn't get to go to the other booth, but they weren't the only one there selling items, so they were participating in that way, which I thought was really nice. And then in the elementary, Renee Hatter and Chastity Miller were working. Elementary has had several teachers working with zones of regulation, which is a curriculum that's about classroom management, self-regulation, learning to be aware and managing your own behaviors. And a lot of the teachers have been using some of the strategies from those ideas, the zones of development. And Renee and Chastity Miller have their 5th and 6th graders working to write scripts based on the different zones that they were using in their classrooms and then being reinforced with special ed. The scripts are then going to be shared with the 1st grade and kindergartners, and the 5th and 6th graders are going to be the directors and direct the younger kids to be the actors to put on skits. So then they're also going to work with the kindergarten and 1st graders to make board games based on the zones of regulation, and they're going to make a video on the different board games that they're making up. The kids are making up their own kind of board games, and they're going to show that on the morning news to the whole school. And then the second page is all about High Tech High. Alex, who was here earlier, was one of the students, and Asa Horowitz was one of our other students, and then there was 8 teachers and myself who went to San Diego to go see High Tech High. And it was actually High Tech High on their Chula Vista campus, and there was a middle school and elementary as well. And we saw a lot in one day. We had a tour of the whole facility, and then we had student ambassadors, 2 student ambassadors, and broke up into 2 groups, to more of an elementary group and more of a middle school, high school group. And the student ambassadors took us around and kind of highlighted some more in-depth things at our level. Then we had lunch, and then we were able to go and see whatever we wanted. We were just set free, and we could visit anywhere within the whole entire school, and all of the teachers, I guess they have these tours regularly. And we were welcome to come into any classroom to visit, to ask questions, take pictures, that kind of thing. So it was really nice to have the time to explore some of the things that we saw. There were just a variety of different things, but there were engineering activities. Everybody commented on the engineering activities. The elementary students had a special that was engineering, that they built things every week. The picture on the bottom, where you see some drawings on the board, I actually, if you want to, you can look at the pictures. They're just general pictures from myself and other people. But that was an engineering room where they had all kinds of resources, and the kids were working on sketches. There's one of the sketch on top. It was the sketch that was pasted up that our elementary teachers were looking at. It was in the high school, and then the picture to the right was, if you turned your back to that board, were the kids working on the prototypes they were making out of cardboard. If you see the quality of the sketch coming around, I couldn't get the depth to show, but these looked amazing. Obviously, they'd gone through a lot of revisions. And then there was a garage door that opened up, and I have a picture of a little girl out there with, she's high school, but she was like my size, shorter little blonde girl, out there with her goggles, at her circular saw, I think it's called, building something that she had made from her prototype. And I'm like, can I take a picture of you? She's like, sure. She's telling me what she made. So it was a different experience. And they had beautifully displayed work, a lot of different technology that they're integrating to make really well-produced work. And I think everybody commented on the quality of the work, how much work was up, and the different engineering types of activities at various levels. I got a lot of those comments. But the other thing everybody commented on was how reaffirmed they were that they were seeing some of the same kinds of ideas and things that they were doing here, that they were seeing some of the same successes, but some of the same struggles that they were grappling with when they were talking to the teachers. And I kind of thought that was amazing, because I asked around and I didn't realize exactly, High Tech High, got a lot of information on it. But they don't have some of the other aspects of a public school. They're more like a charter school. They don't have some of the other expenses that we have. They don't have busing, they don't have, they don't have athletics, they don't have students that are special ed that are lower functioning. Students know what the program is, and parents choose to either take that or stay at their home school. So they don't have as many areas to cover, so they could focus more on the hands-on. But even despite that, our teachers were seeing some of the similarities. And they sent me comments to share with you. Like, kindergarten teacher was telling me that the kindergarten engineering project work was like what our kids were making. Now they had some interesting technology tools to work with, but they were still making some of the same things in kindergarten. And she was able to talk to the kindergarten staff about the structure of the day and just kind of what they do to integrate their special ed kids. And that was just from our regular ed teacher. So she got a lot of good ideas there. Jennifer Scavone was saying that she saw the same things happening at Mills Lawn that she saw there. And and that she loved the engineering class too. And these were all like separate, they emailed me, they mentioned the engineering class. And so she said that she thought that we needed to have a similar class here. So they all want an engineering class at elementary. But it was, she really felt that it was a great experience to be able to see that so much of what we're doing here is in the right direction, if that was our model. Kate Lillmeyer and Becca Eastman looked at 8th grade math class, among other things they commented on. Kate had commented on, she just thought, you know, some of the kids there were working on PBL since kindergarten and 1st grade, and she sees some of the similarities. She just felt that we were coming along, you know, a long way in a short time, because some of our kids are doing the same things that they're doing out there, and she didn't expect that. And some of the kids out there were, even though they had a long history of doing PBLs, they were still trying to figure out things in the uncertainty, and that's kind of what, you know, our teachers kind of grapple with when our kids kind of struggle with that. But they already started brainstorming things to collaborate on projects for next year, just based on what they saw out there. And then there was other comments on technology. We saw like a 1st grade, Kristen McNeely, I saw this one too, and I both saw things like a student, instead of just doing a report and putting a picture up, they would have a QR code underneath it where if you scanned it, it would link to the video. This is a 1st grader. I have that's a picture in there. They interviewed people on greatness and why, you know, what makes people great, and that was all different. And then they made a video and they made a picture, and the QR code would link to their video of why they're special and what makes them great. So there was one, like a picture of a little boy, and he said he was brave, and so underneath it you could see the code, and you could scan that and see his video of what, you know, what he researched, you know, what he found out, and then what he thought about himself, and why, you know, and his reasons for why he was great and it was brave. So we were really impressed by a great deal of that. And I just wanted to share some of those because everybody was so appreciative to have the opportunity. I just thought it would be nice for you to hear their comments and see a little snippet of what they saw.
Thanks.
And I echo sentiments that Donna shared, because in talking to some of the same teachers, said the same thing to me and Matt as well. I think that just how they felt like we're really progressing well, relatively speaking. For the first time on this trip, teachers felt like they were almost colleagues, much more colleagues with these teachers. Like they were helping them as much as we were
They were
getting us.
brainstorming.
So they were brainstorming things together, and so they were interesting, you know, sort of, it's really different in that way for us, so this time.
At lunchtime, the teacher that ate lunch with us, our teachers had asked, well, what do you think from what we said, you know, ideas for us? And he's like, well, actually, we get a lot of groups that come through here, and based on what you've told me and some of the questions you're asking, I could tell you guys are on the right track because you ask all the right questions. And he was actually a trainer that went to England to help them set up some schools. Oh, and I forgot, I did want to share one of the students' comments. I really liked it. As I said, I love this. She said that she got to sit on several classes, and one class I took part of was an art and engineering class. The students that day were learning how to draw from cut up layers of a photo, but the overall project was going to be a design for a local San Diego business. She said the project was really cool. One answer I was given sums up why I think it was so amazing. I asked the teacher who went to school for architecture how much math they do in this art and engineering class, and she said none. I saw 3D models of houses on the wall, and the teacher said they don't do math. I thought that was the neatest thing in the world. So I thought that was a wonderful comment, so I thought I would share it.
All right. Treasurer's report.
I don't want to follow all that. I hardly have anything to report on though. My notes were very short. When I did the 5-year forecast, I had taken out the tangible personal property tax reimbursement that we received from the state. through a state foundation. I had lowered that significantly because the projections were saying that we were going to be phased down, but I lowered it pretty significantly, hoping that it wouldn't be phased down that far, but it was. We got our first payment just this in November, and we were receiving 4 different types of reimbursement to make up for basically the $500,000 that we have lost due to the phase out of the tangible personal property tax. And that's been phased down for several years, but we would receive an amount of money for our regular operating levies. We'd receive an amount of money for our emergency levy, our permanent improvement levy, and our bond levy. And so basically what happened to us, which I believe is due to the projected increase in our state funding, they took away all of the money that we would receive for our regular operating levies. Because the bond levy has to go for the 27 years that it was voted in for, I believe we will receive that reimbursement that whole time. Our permanent improvement and our emergency levies are basically almost set dollar amounts, and so they kept that funding in there, which is not a whole lot of funding. I think we will receive on the year about $28,000 among those 3, and then we lost almost $90,000 this year to the operating levy money that we won't receive anymore. So just a reminder that the whole phase down process that's been going on for 2015, oh gosh, I don't know how long it's been now, probably 12 years, was so that we could vote in new levies to replace that money. So I mean, we did vote in a new levy, but I don't know that it was necessarily to replace that funding, but that it's turning into a permanent loss of revenue. I don't really have anything else to report on right now. I probably won't have much for December also. I've been reporting on the grants, and since we had so many grants this month, I asked the principals if they would look at what I put in the notes and maybe give you a little brief explanation of what we received this month. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt or Tim, whoever wants to go first.
Should I ask you?
Going back to the tangible personal property, is that what it's TPP? So just yesterday, they passed a bill to infuse 40 or 50 million, I remember the figure, to help school districts with the offset of the TPP. Now, I don't have the details enough to know whether those are select school districts, whether we fall into that pool of funding. And it's not been signed by the governor yet, but I know it's on its way to his desk, because it's already been to the House and Senate. So I don't know if there's any word in the treasurer's circles
I have not heard anything
about that.
I don't know how it would be affected, because like what I was gonna look at, I tried to before, for my report this evening, was to see where we're at with the money that we were promised in the biennium budget anyway. But they're not funding us our proper amount yet, because what they'll do is, they're probably not until January, I would imagine, we'll start getting the amount of money that we're supposed to receive for the year. Then I'll be able to better tell you, because when we were receiving all those projections and we were going to get that 20% increase, it's capped at 7.5%, they said it would include this loss of tangible personal property tax. And I just want to make sure that that was truthful. So there are a lot of districts who probably were in the same boat as us. We're not expecting to receive this large increase in the state funding and thus lose that tangible personal property reimbursement. So they probably have been loud enough in letting them know the way the formula worked, it cut revenues in other places, which is what I often say. So, and that is a significant, that's just not a significant loss for us like it is to some other districts who have industrial parks and some of the larger manufacturing areas, and they've just lost a ton of money with that tangible personal property. And to take a hit like that, I mean, that still was a big hit for us, of $90,000, but I can't imagine with some of
There
those
were some
larger.
districts that have lost millions of dollars.
Yes.
So that bill that passed might be for targeted districts.
I would
I
think
don't
so,
know.
but they'll have to come up with a fairness formula. Who knows how that will work out.
Well, and even when you get to the point where something like this happens and then you explain to us what our part would be, then often you end up having to come back and tell us the other place in which they've they
Right.
pulled money out so that in the end, it's not really the help that it's advertised as being anyway. That's what I'm always skeptical of. So maybe it gets signed and maybe we are on the list and maybe we get some money, but then I feel like later on we'll hear where the other
We've lost.
pot shrinks,
Exactly.
so it
Yes.
doesn't matter anyway.
And if we, that's what I'm gonna check, and I won't be able to check probably for another month or two. If we receive, in looking at the tangible personal property tax reimbursement and our state funding, if we receive a 7.5% increase, then they have done what they've said
Okay.
with the formula. And that's, I will check that when I'm able to.
Evan, did you want?
But do I understand correctly that one way or the other, that the 20% increase with the 7.5% ceiling is in some way connected to TPP? In other words, they're working this in such a way that for districts that are, I mean, you're talking about from like the two separate issues. There's this funding increase and then there's TPP. And I'm asking, is their intent, is their thinking at the state that these two things are connected? We're going to do this increase so that we can relieve ourselves of this other.
It did not used to be, they used to be two separate things. And when the state, in their creativity, is, it's hard to explain. When they started blending them together so that they, it's political. It's more of, they blend them together so they can say, we are holding districts harmless, but they're adding these things together and it makes it look like we're being held harmless, but we're really not. And they are two separate things.
And I'm not asking that question as a judgment about whether they should or shouldn't. I'm just only asking, just to clarify, should we expect these two issues to be separate issues, or are they connected?
I think that they should have always have been separate issues. It was when they were phasing down the tangible personal property tax, they voted in that CAT tax that was on businesses and their revenues, and that was supposed to subsidize the loss of tangible personal property. And they've kept that money separate, but somehow they've incorporated these tangible personal property tax reimbursements into our state foundation. And that's where it got kind of convoluted. And now this CAT tax is covering other things that it wasn't even supposed to cover in the first place. And they're using this tangible personal property reimbursement in with our regular foundation funding for our student count, which doesn't make any sense. They're two separate issues, two separate things.
Just one more clarifying question. So the total loss of tangible personal property tax, you said, is $500,000. Like, we used to get about $500,000 more, going back X amount of years before they started phasing out.
Yes.
Significant.
Cumulative loss.
Cumulative?
Annual.
Annual.
It was annual. We
Okay.
received,
Half a
and
million
part of that is
annually.
also, it's not just the actual phase out, it's loss of our businesses in our district. That, some of that would have happened inevitably
Right.
anyway, but it is due to the phase out of that whole,
I guess in
the
the
tangible
cumulative
personal
phase out, you're not gonna have that at the tip of your fingers, but that would be, millions.
we have at half a million a year. We have been typically receiving somewhere around $80,000 a year still, and that's for public utility property. And that's also being phased down still. So, and so we used to receive over 500,000, so, and the loss is 400 something right now.
I guess, if I may, I'd like to just make commentary to us as a board that rather than think of this as some type of adversarial, us against the state, they're taking our funding away, it's just reality. States are faced with the same kind of challenges that everybody is faced with. It just makes us that much more focused on priority 4. Right? It just means that rather than worry about or otherwise complain about what is or isn't happening at the state or whether that we just stay focused on our strike plan. Because we have identified priority 4 as a long-term vision for how we're going to allow the state to be the state. They're still good partners with us. They're doing the best they can. We have to make those assumptions. And we're going to be self-reliant and self-responsible, proactive to do what we have to do.
Well, I have to-
We've identified it. Priority 4 is our.
And I have to say, and this sounds like I'm defending the state, and Mario might help me, when we were getting those biennial budget figures early in the spring, and they were showing us what we're going to receive, we are the only district in Greene County this year to get a state funding increase. There was no, I mean, we're talking Fairborn and Xenia, and we were the only ones. Now, next year, everybody else would get an increase, but we by far hit the cap both years, and I mean, the formula still doesn't make any sense to me, considering we're considered wealthy, and here we are with these other poor districts around us, and they were receiving no increase at all. They were at the held harmless level.
I'm only making a commentary not as a defending or not defending anybody, only as really just a commentary about our focus for the last 5 years now on taking responsibility for what we need. And
well, it doesn't help our marketing campaign at all. It's contradictory.
well, what do you mean by that?
Because I think one of our
What
marketing
marketing
campaigns in getting private funds would be that we're losing state funding or we're held harmless, and here we're getting 7.5% increases when no one around us is. It makes it harder for us, I think.
But the total loss of state
It's
funding.
still a loss.
Yeah.
Yes, over time, it's still a
I
loss.
think not to put it in terms of marketing, but just to stick to what is real. What is real is we have to assume the state, that everybody that gets cuts from state, everyone is asking them, hey, what happened, and they're going, oh, you know. And I like the fact that we are simply not focused on having arguments with the state, but rather, what are we going to do? And how are we going to take care of what we need for our students for both the short and long term?
Recognizing that it's gonna happen
That is going to happen.
beyond our control.
Right.
And
Part
so
of-
what we can do is,
The core of our argument for priority 4 is current public funding, current funding for public schools can keep our lights on. They can never help us innovate. They can never help us lead. They will, it'll always make sure that the building's here and that people can show up and teach kids. It's not going to get us to the next level. I think that this is one example of how the state, in its best efforts, trying to spread all the limited money they have around the state, this is the best they can do, and yet we have a great vision for how we're going to take responsibility for that.
When I started 20 years ago, it was very typical for the philosophy to be for school districts, the state's going to bail us out. And it's taken all these 20 years to finally realize that's not going to happen. It's hard to, especially if you've been in the business for a long time, the state did used to bail us out, and now they just don't have the funding to, it's like what you said, they don't have the funding to do so. So we are bleeding a turnip.
Yeah, I don't want us to think of it like they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I want us to think of it like they're doing it, or I mean.
Do you think they've cut a lot of taxes significantly to be able to have this problem? You know?
Sure.
Sure. It's a little bit of separate issue.
I'm not,
So I think there's
I
just-
truly am not defending the state, I'm simply, I think I've said it. so.
all right,
So back to the principals,
yes.
or
Well,
grades.
let me just, in the interest of time, I can go through these really quickly, and if these guys want to add anything, they can, but just the Native American storytellers. So these are all YSCF grants, and we want to be very thankful to the Community Foundation and the Endowments for Education for all of these great grants. Really, it is, we don't have any more funds left in the YSC fund at this point. We've used them all, which is so great that the YSC did that, and they were gracious enough to share with me that even if further grants come in, they want to still receive them because there might be ways to advocate to get that funding from other sources within the Community Foundation. So we are thrilled about that and very happy that they're willing to consider that idea even going forward. But the Native American Storyteller Grant is a middle school grant, I believe, correct, Tim? And essentially, I don't know what the funds specifically go towards. Do you?
The storyteller one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was,
is that to bring
the
somebody
hoop
in?
dancer,
Okay,
and
so
then he
that's-
also played it, performed at Antioch College.
So they're doing a whole unit at the middle school around Native American storytelling. Pretty great
That was cool.
work they're doing in Cameron's class. And so the food for thought, you know about those, the t-shirts, that was Charlotte Drake. First Lego League, actually, and I'm glad this came up, they purchased robots for the 2 Yellow Springs schools teams, well, Yellow Springs kids teams, all the kids are from our schools essentially. And for the robots, so the robots are technically owned by Yellow Springs schools. And then for the all-school musical, we know about that. 3 Miller Fellows, are working up at the high school right now, specifically assisting a number of teachers. They worked a lot, one of the fellows at least worked a lot on the project, the Food for Thought project. Anything else, Tim, you want to add?
There's one in a math tutor who's full bore. He used to actually started with us a couple of years ago. So, so he's back and doing wonderful work again.
Okay. So then the Makerspace project, you know about that. This is the first year's funding. We're going to need a second year, and we're starting to work on that now. Disc golf project is going forward. So we're going to have.
I knew that would get fun.
We're going to have.
It's too good.
Frisbee golf, basically, on both sites here, Mills Lawn at the high school. I think they're going to put 6 or 7 or 8 holes here, 6 holes here probably, and I think 12 at the high school is the idea. And kids are working on it right now as we speak. So that sums up some of those grants.
Okay, very cool, thank you.
Oh, I just want to correct for the camera that the Native American storyteller was a really like.
So she was working with Cameron on the project, but she's the one that.
She was organizing it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're on to the superintendent's report.
Okay. I'm going to put a timer on for 2 minutes. Regulate
Well,
myself.
half the things
It's good
we
that you
know
have
about.
these meetings
usually.
before dinner, you know.
Yes, that's right.
It creates an imperative.
So, I have a whole different ethic right now. And Steve, you're right on the money there. Okay, so, and I can go into more detail about this later. I don't know that I need to go into too much detail about the ESSA right now. I think, especially since the law hasn't technically passed yet. So this is a big deal. Obviously, No Child Left Behind there is pretty much over. It passed the House and the Senate by overwhelming strong majorities. The Republicans and Democrats are high-fiving each other over their bipartisanship in this effort, and everybody's excited because nobody got what they want. Everybody got a little bit of what they wanted, and they got a little bit of what they didn't get. But, so it's kind of an interesting, an exciting time. So finally, what many thought was not going to happen is actually going to happen. So No Child Left Behind is going away. A couple changes that we know are going to happen. The new law is going to be called the Every Student Succeeds Act, so ESSA. Not to be confused with ESEA, which is the actual real name of the law. So it's sort of confusing, but anyway. There is, in this new law, there's no AYP, so AYP, adequate yearly progress, and all of the crazy benchmarks that by 2014, 100% of the kids will be proficient. That's not there anymore, which is a good thing, no federal requirement to do that. There's no teacher evaluations being tied to student test scores, or at least it doesn't mention it. It's curiously absent in the bill, and so I'm going to try to do a history lesson at the end of this real quick. 3rd through 8th grade tests in reading and math and high school science still. Some flexibility in including other options in terms of scores like and report cards like student surveys you can add, graduation rates, performance-based assessment portfolios, that kind of things included. They want to disaggregate subgroups still, so you still are going to be disaggregating subgroups. That was sort of their nod towards a lot of the civil rights groups who've been raising issues with it. The lowest 5% in test scores in schools still fall under some sanctions, but they're not coming from the feds. They have to be coming from the state themselves. And then anybody who's has less than 66% wow, that's quick. Less than 66% graduation rate. I'm gonna make 2 more minutes. Less than 66% graduation rate. We'll have sanctions as well. And I'm not sure about waivers, but it still could be a problem. We're still gonna have to work through our waiver with this, but this is a new world that we're gonna figure it out in January. We have a meeting with our folks that are working on this in Columbus. And
So our process continues.
our process continues. Yes.
The journey never ends.
Yeah. So in the end, the idea is the states are supposed to be making more strong standards themselves, and they make their own tests, but they have to be strong standards and strong tests. And so it's very interesting the way it's looking. I believe that to sum it all up, there's been a federal overreach, and everybody's reacting, and so in order to deal with it, they're putting it all on the states to deal with it now. And they're saying the locals, but it looks pretty much like the state. And the state will be making all these decisions. The nice thing about that is we're only a 2-hour drive, actually 45-minute drive from Columbus versus a 10-hour, how many hours to DC? 8-hour drive to DC. It feels so much longer.
All the stopping and the traffic, but.
To DC. So this is a big deal and positive step in the right direction. I'm not going to be the cheerleader of this bill, but I do think it's a step in the right direction. There should be some, at least the debates now will be happening with folks that we know, like Peggy Lehner and our state superintendent and all the people up in ODE that we can actually talk to a little bit about these things, and they can no longer say it's the Fed's fault. Now it's on them to decide what they feel like is most appropriate course of action. So I'm thrilled about that opportunity to really have, be able to work with people we already have relationships with, I think, within the state governments as well as the bureaucracy of the ODE. So 2 straight A, so the other, well, that's all I'll say about that. 2 straight A grants that we've applied for, the Greene County ESC grant, the old trustee grant that we've done a few times before with electronic flex books. We're doing it again, except this time Terry Streeter rewrote it herself and did some different things with it.
It's very telling,
2
isn't it?
minutes per topic.
Second grant. We are also going for the ILN. The ILN is submitting a straight A grant as well. This is one for PBA training around performance-based assessments, essentially, to create them and train folks across the state. So hopefully we'll get the funding for this to go forward. That would bring in Stanford to help train all the districts within the ILN. PBL training as well is included in this, and my hope is that Yellow Springs becomes a vendor in this work to help train other schools within the ILN, and so we have a lot of work to do around that and getting there, but it's a good thing. Exhibition night is next Wednesday, 6 to 8 at the high school. You've heard a little bit about that, but I want everybody to come out. And the last thing I'll say is what I told our teachers the other day in our late Wednesday meeting, which is that a lot of great things are happening. We had an article in the Xenia Press Wednesday morning, Gazette, I mean, and bottom of the fold, right there on the front page of our kids doing coding, which was great and excellent. I don't know if you saw the Yellow Springs News today, a wonderful article in there about the work being done in the 2nd grade with our seniors, from our kids. And then finally, we have 3 districts now really eager to work with us, in addition to the one that was the Alpha grant. And so, you know, we got, as we know, Finneytown, they're still wanting to come back, and they're going to be coming back again in January. We have Fairmont, Fairfield East.
Fairfield Union's visiting.
Fairfield Union visiting, want to come for the exhibition night, but they're going to come next week. And then, here's the big one, Oakwood wants to come check us out and see what we're doing. So they're coming, they've got a
Charge them a lot.
Well, that's what we talked about. We're going to charge them some money. This is going to be our first group. So we're excited about all these districts interested in what we're doing, and we're going to continue to work with them. And yeah, maybe not just yet. That's all I had.
The exhibition is also concerts, all the same night.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. You're being conscious on the same night too. So
Little 15-minute segments.
Yeah.
Middle school orchestra, middle school band, high school orchestra, high school band. So we're gonna have a lot of parents coming in. Deeper learning, exhibition alley. We got ready.
Awesome.
All right, moving on to the administrative portion of the consent calendar, 4.2 through 4.4. Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I don't believe there's any need to pull anything out here. Anybody need anything later? Okay, let's have a roll call.
Who motioned and seconded? Sorry.
I motion.
Making notes.
And I second it.
Sorry. Steve?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Aida?
Yes,
Sylvia?
Yes.
that's you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. All right,
It also, Madam President, if you will, it also raises our sub-teacher rate. We
Yes.
talked about $80 to $90 a day, which is a big deal. We talked about it last time, but I think it's great to.
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. All right, on to personnel portion of the consent calendar, 4.5 through 4.7. Okay, so, is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Jinx.
Got that? Okay. So, I would like to just speak to, just very briefly, that we've had a lot of late coach hires lately. And this has kind of been unique here in the last little bit of time. So, I don't know if you want to just say something a little bit about that. And I'd appreciate it if that didn't keep coming up the way it has.
We apologize from the high school on many of these names coming up. Some of them are things that we couldn't predict. Coaches hired, not showing up at all. Athletic director trying to cover for those coaches, assuming that they'll be coming out. And really what we need to do is we've spoken with Mario and Susan and Nate and I, sat down together, and we need to be on it earlier and more proactively, and be rid of folks rather than trying to work with them. So that's really, that's most of the issues we think.
So let me clarify that for the purpose of the, I think it's important to note that if somebody's not working out, we need to make sure that, you know, we work with them quickly, and we try to, instead of waiting a long time for a coach to come and work with our kids, that we need to confront the situation sooner and work with our coaches so that we can get a quality coach in front of the kids. You know, that's probably.
That sounds much better.
That's you can retract that former statement you just said. That was.
My policy still stands.
Yeah, but I think the other thing I'll say is, so Tim and I had a meeting this week, just yesterday or 2 days ago.
This week.
Just 2 days ago, I think it was. We had a good hour-long meeting with him. He and Nate and Susan had a long discussion about this very topic, and we were very clear discussion about the process of hiring and the way it works, which is that the athletic director recommends somebody, tells the candidate, I'm going to recommend you to be hired, ultimately by the Board of Education, which would mean that the recommendation goes to the principal then makes the recommendation to me. I then can have a couple options, which means that if I want that, if that person needs to start working immediately because it's an emergency hire, which is often the case in athletics, I can then say, Tim, go ahead and start that coach working immediately while we wait for the next board meeting to come, because it's going to be a few weeks, in which case you would retroactively get that, but those are situations where it's, you know, the right way to do it. But what we would say is ultimately the Board of Education hires. You know, we don't hire people in advance. The athletic director doesn't hire, the principal doesn't hire, I don't hire. The Board of Education is the only entity that can hire anybody. You know, I can get people to start early in an emergency when we need to, but only the board can hire, and that's a really important element here. And so to have, you know, in this case, a coach that we're essentially, you know, hiring after the season's already over, is not a good practice to get into. And I want to make sure that so that was part of the reason we did this. It's happened a few times in a few different positions. So we're
And
getting.
she's not one of those people who just sort of decided not to be there.
No, actually she did the opposite.
Yeah.
She stepped up and took on the role of the position and did an incredible job with it. The challenge is making sure that in our conversation with people we say, you are not hired at this point, and we need to immediately communicate to the principal, who then can communicate to the superintendent immediately that we want you to be the coach, and we'll see what they say. So right now, if you're working, you're volunteering, but you're not hired until we get the okay from the superintendent that you're hired for that particular position. So it's just kind of the nuances of that, which are, as you can imagine, that when you're in the thick of it, and the season's doing what's happening, and everything's going on, it's really tough to get that going. But it's just about improving our communication, and so. You know, I take responsibility for that. I need to make sure that happens. And so that meeting with Nate was important. And Tim.
Did you figure out, I don't know the details, but did you tweak the process?
We did, well, we clarified it.
Well, I think one thing you'll see is that instead of the blanket removing of staff at the end of the year that we do, we're going to do this in shifts. So that once we,
seasonally?
yes,
Yeah.
so that once we, you know, at the end of fall sports, you know, we can go ahead and do that action on them. And then we can actually, when Nate has a conversation with them, and he has a conversation with each coach, we can see, are you in for next year or not? And it's always better if we have a returning coach. Just always is.
Yeah.
They understand the community, they understand the students, they understand, and they're building a program. And so then we can kind of move into it, and then our job is kind of keeping them, keeping connected to them throughout, so that when it comes time in the fall again, we've already had communication, we know when they're going to need gym space and field space, and it's gone through. So you'll see more names coming in now than just at the end of the summer and moving forward. You'll see kind of 3 shifts, if you will.
So that's the largest problem. The other question is, why are we losing coaches in the middle of it? I mean, this has not happened, I don't think, historically, worse than it is this year particularly, which is that the people we're hiring are just not showing up. You're literally, I mean, that's what we're having here at times. And so that speaks to how much we're paying our coaches in many ways, whether we're getting people who really want to do it and stick around. And so that's a contractual issue that we need to work on when we negotiate this year, is making sure our coaches are paid an appropriate amount that's at least competitive with the region, which is not right now, frankly. It's a real challenge. It's something we need to work on to make it more competitive with the region. Also looking at our supplemental contracts collectively and making sure they're balanced and that we're paying appropriate amounts that are competitive with the region and elsewhere. There are some really odd imbalances in the supplemental contract where some stipends are getting paid significantly more than they would get paid in other districts, and others are getting significantly less than they would get paid in another district. Another example is an issue of, we have a assistant baseball coach in the contract. We don't have an assistant softball coach in the contract. So consequently, we have not hired either and paid for either stipend, because if we were to pay for a assistant baseball coach, I think we run into Title IX issues, rightfully so, for not hiring a girls softball assistant coach. So we got to get that girls softball assistant coach in the contract so that we can then, hire them and get both of those assistant positions. Because right now, baseball and softball, I'm picking on right now. But right now, we have great coaches. We have 2 or 3 assistants who are working completely for free to do the work, and luckily Jim DeLong and Ben Cooper have been able to convince people to, or get people to really work with the kids and commit every day and really work hard. It's hard work coaching, and he's been able to get a strong commitment from a lot of people on a volunteer basis, but that's not always the case, and in most districts that's not the case at all. I mean, folks are getting paid 2 to 3 times what we're paying to coach sports. So.
Okay, thanks, appreciate it. All right, anything else? Roll call. Oh, sorry.
4.5, is this new? Have we done this before? A shared service contract?
This one's a little interesting. We always had, as long as I've been here, one of our previous bus drivers was our trainer. And she would train our own people, and then any subs and possibly others from outside the district. And when she left, we started using Cedar Cliff. And so when we were at Cedar Cliff, when we had some scheduling issues, and that's just been kind of not working out so well. But we used to have a bus driver, Mr. Sandlin, and he and his wife are from the Greenon area, and his wife drives for Greenon and has for a long time. And she has become an onboard instructor, and so we've started using her instead. And the treasurer and superintendent of Greenon wanted us to sign an actual agreement. Now, I kind of made an argument with them because I don't feel like it's a shared service. I feel like if it's a shared service, we'd both be paying her salary, but we're not. We're just contracting a service on a purchase order. So it's just something that they would like for us to approve to be able to use her services, so.
Just a little formality.
Yeah.
They just decided they wanted all of a sudden.
Well, we just have recently started doing this. When we had to do the training for the bands, Tim, you are, I can see you. Cindy trained Tim and the other 2, and then she's available to train our other bus drivers and subs, so.
Thanks.
Okay, roll call.
Sean?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Aida?
Yes.
Sylvia?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
All right, all passes. Okay, we are going to go on to board communications. We need to set the date for the organizational meeting and budget hearing, which is typically the first meeting of the month, which is January
14?
14th. We okay with that? Everybody got that? And 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock now?
Or 6:30?
6:30, because I can
6:30.
usually get it done rather quickly.
Okay.
That's all we concentrate on during that half an hour.
Okay, so January
6:30.
14th at 6:30. And we need to appoint a president pro tem for that organizational meeting. Who wants to do that? Anybody?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Go.
All right.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown.
All right, 5.3, we have a work session scheduled for January 19th, 2016.
I need to vote on Steve.
Oh.
It should have
Oh, yeah, I'm
been
sorry.
there.
Oh, yeah.
So do we motion that he does
You
it?
had somebody,
Okay, so moved.
he nominated himself.
Okay, I'll second his nomination.
Okay, now roll call it.
Evan, Sylvia.
Good catch.
Evan,
Yes.
Aida,
Yes.
Sylvia,
Yes.
Steve,
Sure.
Sean.
Yes.
I should vote no.
Majority
Your
rules, too
first
bad.
no vote.
All right, so
Interesting.
work session scheduled for January 19th, 2016 from 4 to 6.
Is that here?
Sorry?
Is that here?
Yeah. And then,
Maybe you're out.
My vacuum. Gotta get some of the dog hair up.
okay, now we have to set a date for the 2020 update. That's for the public meeting, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we want to send out dates, some possibilities?
do that if you like.
And then- yeah, let's do that, because,
Yeah, maybe we were talking about sort of towards the end of the school year. Obviously, you have a lot going on. I think we were talking about, yeah, sort of as a, that's what it's in my head, but my memory could be
I think
5.
that might have come up in the discussion, I'm not sure everybody agreed with it, but I think that was part of the, because I think we were talking initially about February or something like that, and then maybe, I think that's when you brought up this idea of, we really did do that then, maybe we can just put.
are you talking about the end of the school year?
Yes, so
Not this-
May,
Oh, in May.
this May, the end of the school.
I,
I
So
just
far.
wanted to hear,
So far it
I was
is.
just hearing it, Carter.
I'm totally agnostic about this, except that I guess, you know, the first thing to do is to see what's already gonna be on the calendar for May, since I always feel like there's a kind of car wreck at the end of
You might have
the.
a lot going on.
So if it were late April,
I was gonna say, I would rather,
before all the stuff starts to accumulate, maybe
I'm
that.
wondering,
based on your calendar, I would rather see it after spring break, but early after spring break.
yeah, okay.
Oh.
It would be, yeah, we'll talk about it one day, right?
And I guess what a lot of people we would want to come to such a meeting would be parents and community members who are gonna be committed to all those events that they're gonna go to, and, you know, so there's gonna be a certain amount of fatigue, I think.
Did we talk about teeing it up at one of those events?
Yeah, we did, actually,
We did.
You know what?
Like
You're right.
PBL,
This is,
the next PBL.
Oh,
spring
yeah,
PBL night
maybe that's,
is what, we're like,
Yeah.
well, we had an
Did come up, I
audience.
think,
Oh,
too.
spring exhibition night?
Can we see the videotape?
Actually, you're right. I was here at that one. You talked about the elementary school presentation night in January, and then you decided that was too soon, and then I think you said something about the spring exhibition night and tying it to, putting it in the gym either before or after.
thank God, somebody's paying.
Thank you.
Is it in the minutes?
Sean's memory.
Between the two of us.
Although I could pull it up. I mean, I don't know if we have 2 hours to go back through it.
Well, we could go through it, but I think we just need to look at the
Okay.
schedule.
So why don't I find the 2 exhibition dates, send those out to everybody, and make sure that works for everyone?
Anybody know those off the top of your
Well,
head?
we can find them very,
Yeah.
you guys know those off the top of your head? We'll find out what we're talking about.
Okay.
On the new website.
All right, so we'll hear from you around that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so 5.5, January agenda discussion items, just, this is what we have to do in the January organizational meeting, is look again at board leadership and officers. We assign board committees, which I'd ask people to kind of consider what you've been doing, if you want to be doing that again, and just, be aware that that's going to happen. And looking at the calendar, which basically is the meeting calendar, and that usually stays the same, but if there's any reason for it not to, be prepared to talk about that. All right, I also want to thank Sean. He sent me this 6 competencies of effective boards, and I asked Susan to copy that for everybody because I thought that was helpful in terms of looking at, since we always kind of think about board membership and leadership, and that might also be something to kind of scan over in terms of thinking about officers and so forth. So anyway, we're always looking at ways of evaluating, and I thought that was helpful in terms of that as well. So
May
thank you,
13th is the
Sean.
exhibition.
May 13th is the middle school, high school, and then May 11th is the elementary.
So that's May, that's during that.
Well, but if we're piggybacking
Yeah.
on the event, then that could work, because you would have people in the room.
May 11th and 16th, is that what you said?
13th.
11 and 13.
Okay, Greene County Career Center report.
2 things that, and Dave hinted at one of them. It does look as if we're going to have some turnover, or we may well have some turnover on the board, because 2 of the members of the 7-member board were not reelected in November. And that board has had some remarkable continuity over the years, and so it looks as if, well, we'll see what happens come January, especially with these new regulations about appointing board members, what the constitution of that board's going to be. But yeah, it was kind of sad about those election results in Beaver Creek and in Fairborn. The other sort of fun event that happened was that Temple Grandin came to the Career Center and met with kids and did some talks and was out at the barns and apparently just, dazzled everybody, and the kids loved her and she loved the Career Center. So it's just, this is a national celebrity showing up to the Career Center for an afternoon, and she was she UD maybe? She was
She was
speaking
at Wright State,
Wright
and then
State.
she was at UD. And she
Right, well,
was-
apparently, the money she was traveling on requires her to do some educational work at the high school level. And so she wound up coming to us, and yeah, so that was really cool, to have an afternoon with her. So that's what I'll report from the Career Center.
Well, thanks. All right, any other items?
Just one small day, I was in a meeting the other day, this was Leadership Council, I serve on partnership with Right Pat, and they were community partnerships between the base and their surrounding communities, and they were giving us an overview of other partnerships around the country. And one of them was this base working around connecting spouses of military personnel to the school districts in terms of substitute teaching positions and other opportunities. And so in the meeting, I was like, wow, it's a great program. And so it's something that immediately we started talking about, like, what is going on here in terms of our community and connecting Right Pat spouses to the districts, especially with this shortage of substitute teachers. So I just wanted to share that that came up in a meeting, and maybe something to think about how we communicate out opportunities through some of the main offices on base.
Yeah.
Are you, either of you, I'm assuming you do, but maybe you don't, know and are familiar with Seth Gordon? So Seth runs the Wright State Center for Veteran Affairs and is already, I happen to know, is already hooked into that. So he would be an easy
That'd be a
connection for us to talk to.
Great place to start.
You know Seth?
Yeah, there's a liaison to the schools that connects regularly with us, I think. I don't know if Seth, she probably works under Seth, I imagine, so.
Somebody from Wright State.
Yeah, no, nothing Wright State, I'm sorry.
Right, Pat.
Right Pat.
From Right Pat.
Yeah. Are you were talking about Wright State or Right Pat?
Well, Seth works for Wright State, but he oversees Veteran Affairs, so he's completely plugged into the base.
Oh, I think so, I know he's in
He works at Wright State, and he's the director of the Center for Veterans Affairs. And as Sean suggested, they run a lot of programs with Right Pat through his center, one of which is engaging spouses in different ways.
Yeah.
Okay. So Seth might be the right guy to talk to him.
He would at least know, I think he would know where to start.
Right.
Yep, all right. Good job, man. Good. So we have gotten, I don't think we have 7 subs on the list today, so our recheck little mini poster campaign seems to be working. So it's a good start.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, anything else? Alrighty, we are moving into an executive session. Is there a motion?
So
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.